The vastness of space was no longer an insurmountable barrier for humanity. In the year 2274, faster than light travel had transformed the distant stars into reachable destinations, and the Andromeda galaxy, once a glimmer in the night sky, now lay within humanity's grasp. Diplomat Robert Carter stood on the observation deck of the starship Endeavour, watching the swirling nebulae and distant stars blur into streaks of light as the ship exited hyperspace. Robert was a seasoned diplomat, known for his calm demeanor and sharp intellect. His piercing blue eyes had seen the complexities of interstellar politics, and his steadfast resolve had forged alliances that once seemed impossible. Yet, as Andromeda's capital planet, Eloria, came into view, even Robert felt a twinge of awe. The planet glowed like a jewel amidst the void, its surface a tapestry of shimmering cities, lush forests, and vast oceans. The Endeavour descended through Eloria's atmosphere, the transition from the cold emptiness of space to the vibrant, bustling world below almost palpable. Robert adjusted his suit, ensuring every detail was perfect. This mission was more than a diplomatic venture. It was a lifeline for Earth, an opportunity to forge a bond with a powerful empire that could secure humanity's place among the stars. The landing bay was a hive of activity, with sleek spacecraft and bustling personnel moving with precise coordination. As Robert disembarked, he was greeted by a delegation of Andromedan officials, their attire a blend of elegant robes and advanced technology. Leading them was Commander Thalos, a stern-faced man whose silver eyes scrutinized Robert with keen interest. "Welcome to Eloria, Ambassador Carter," Thalos said, his voice a deep, resonant timbre. "The Empire of Andromeda extends its greetings to you and your people." "Thank you, Commander Thalos," Robert replied, his voice steady. "It is an honor to be here. I look forward to strengthening the bonds between our worlds." As they made their way through the grand corridors of the palace, Robert marveled at the intricate architecture. The walls seemed to pulse with a soft, luminescent glow, and the air was filled with a subtle, melodious hum. It was as if the very essence of the planet was alive, resonating with an energy that was both ancient and advanced. The banquet hall was a sight to behold, a vast chamber adorned with shimmering tapestries and ornate chandeliers that cast a warm, inviting glow. The air was fragrant with exotic aromas, and a symphony of alien instruments played a hauntingly beautiful melody. Robert felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation as he scanned the room, knowing that the evening would set the tone for his mission. His gaze settled on Princess Adira, who stood at the far end of the hall, surrounded by a throng of dignitaries. She was striking, her presence commanding, and her beauty undeniable. Her emerald green eyes sparkled with intelligence, and her dark hair cascaded down her back in soft waves. As their eyes met, Robert felt an inexplicable connection, a sense that this moment was destined. Princess Adira approached with a graceful confidence, her entourage parting like a sea before her. "Ambassador Carter, welcome to Eloria," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. "I trust your journey was pleasant?" "It was, Your Highness," Robert replied, inclining his head respectfully. "I am honored to be here and eager to learn more about your magnificent world." Adira's eyes seemed to search his soul, and for a moment Robert felt as if she could see the very core of his being. "We have much to discuss, Ambassador," she said, a hint of warmth in her tone. "But for now, let us enjoy the evening. There will be time for diplomacy tomorrow." As the evening progressed, Robert found himself drawn into conversations with various officials and dignitaries. The Andromedans were a complex people, their society a blend of tradition and innovation. Yet beneath the surface, Robert sensed an undercurrent of tension, whispers of unrest that threatened to unravel the empire's stability. Later that night, as he stood on a balcony overlooking the city, Robert's mind raced with the implications of his mission. The stakes were high, and failure was not an option. He had to navigate the intricate web of Andromedan politics, secure the trade agreement, and, most importantly, ensure that Earth's alliance with the Empire remained unshaken. Princess Adira joined him on the balcony, her presence a comforting anchor amidst his swirling thoughts. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said softly, gesturing to the city below. Aloria is a world of contrasts, of light and shadow, much like our people. It is indeed, Robert replied, his gaze fixed on the twinkling lights of the city, and I believe our worlds have much to learn from each other. Adira turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. I hope that together we can build a future of peace and prosperity, Ambassador, for both our peoples. In that moment, Robert felt a profound sense of purpose. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with Adira by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came their way. The Andromeda Accord was not just a diplomatic mission. It was a journey of discovery, of forging bonds that could change the fate of two worlds. And so, under the starlit skies of Aloria, the seeds of a powerful alliance were sown, and the story of Robert and Adira began. The atmosphere inside the opulent banquet hall of the Andromeda Royal Palace was electric, charged with the whispers of diplomats and the glint of starlight refracting through the towering glass dome above. It was here, amidst a galaxy of foreign dignitaries and stately nobles, that Robert Carter, Earth's appointed ambassador, made his debut on the intergalactic stage. The hall was a marvel of Andromedan architecture, grandiose and awe-inspiring, with walls that shimmered with a kind of luminescent mineral found only in the deepest mines of the Empire. As he entered, Robert couldn't help but pause to take in the breathtaking sight. The vast ceiling painted to reflect the galaxy, complete with swirling nebulas and twinkling stars, and the long tables set with crystalline dinnerware that sparkled under the ambient light of floating luminaries. Robert was clad in a suit of Earth's finest make, tailored to impress yet respectful of Andromedan aesthetics. His attire was a subtle blend of tradition and diplomacy, a visual metaphor for the bridge he hoped to build between Earth and this mighty empire. As the guests mingled, a soft melody played by an ensemble of exotic instruments filled the air, creating a soothing backdrop to the undercurrent of tense conversations. Robert navigated through groups of attendees, exchanging pleasantries and probing gently for political sentiments, his diplomat's mind always at work. Then she entered. Princess Adira of Andromeda, draped in a flowing gown that seemed woven from the very essence of the night sky, her presence commanding silence and admiration alike. Her eyes, a vibrant emerald green, scanned the room with an air of serene confidence. As she made her way to her seat, the crowd parted, not just in deference, but in a palpable mix of respect and fear. The dinner commenced with a traditional Andromedan blessing, a chant that resonated with the deep timbres of ancient history and the hope of peace. The courses that followed were a gastronomic expedition in themselves. Dishes that played with gravity, beverages that changed flavors as they were consumed, and desserts that whispered tales of distant worlds to the taste buds. During the meal, Robert found himself seated next to Princess Adira. Their initial conversation was the careful dance of diplomacy, measured, courteous, and laced with the undercurrents of their respective missions. Yet, as the dishes came and went, their dialogue ventured into realms beyond mere trade and treaties. Adira spoke passionately about her people's art and culture, her voice dipping with concern when she touched upon the recent unrest. Robert listened intently, offering insights from Earth's own history, with conflict and reconciliation. The conversation subtly shifted to themes of governance and stability, and it was then that Robert realized Adira was not just a princess by birth, but a leader by nature. Their discussion was interrupted by a sudden commotion at the far end of the hall. A group of young nobles, fueled perhaps by too much star wine, began a heated debate that threatened to escalate. Adira excused herself with a graceful nod and approached the quarrel, her demeanor shifting seamlessly from the congenial hostess to the authoritative future queen. With a few measured words and a calm yet firm tone, she quelled the burgeoning dispute, her intervention as swift as it was effective. As the banquet drew to a close, Robert and Adira exchanged looks of mutual respect. The night had begun with a feast, but as the guests departed under the silent watch of Andromedan moons, it was clear that a different kind of alliance had been forged, one not just of empires, but of minds and perhaps of hearts. The gravity of their task lay heavily upon them, yet for the first time, Robert felt a spark of hope that together they might just prevent the fall of an empire. In the dead of night, the first explosion rattled the northern district of the capital. It was quickly followed by another, and then another, each blast closer than the last, crescendoing into a relentless assault. Rebels, hidden within the populace and fueled by years of suppressed rage, had finally ignited the spark of rebellion. Their coordinated attacks threw the imperial forces into disarray, breaking the fragile peace that had been meticulously maintained by the royal family. The palace, a symbol of centuries of tradition and power, was suddenly vulnerable. Within its ornate walls, Princess Adira was roused from sleep by her chief advisor's urgent whispers. Dressed hastily in dark robes that masked her royal lineage, she navigated the panicked corridors to the palace's war room, where Robert had already been summoned. The room was a flurry of activity. Holographic maps flickered with red, showing rebel movements and imperial responses. The air was thick with tension as generals and advisors shouted over each other, their voices a cacophony of fear and resolve. Adira stepped forward, her presence commanding silence. Her eyes met Robert's, and for a moment their shared uncertainty was palpable. But duty prevailed, and Adira addressed the assembly with a voice that wove calm into the chaos. "We must act swiftly," Adira declared, her gaze sweeping over the maps. "The rebels are organized and anticipate our hesitation. We shall offer them no such advantage." Robert, observing the unfolding strategy, was struck by Adira's transformation from the poised diplomat to a wartime leader. He knew the importance of his role now, not just as a mediator for trade, but as a potential linchpin in the empire's survival. He proposed a counter-strategy, leveraging his outsider's perspective to predict the rebels' next moves. "Your Highness, if we can secure the outer districts and cut off their supply lines, we may be able to isolate the rebels and reduce their maneuverability," Robert suggested, his finger tracing potential routes on the map. Adira considered his words, her mind racing through scenarios. "An excellent strategy, Robert. We shall deploy our forces accordingly, but we need someone to oversee this directly, someone unanticipated by the rebels." Her eyes locked with his, a silent offer hanging between them. Robert nodded in understanding and acceptance. This was his chance to truly aid in the preservation of a world not his own, driven not only by duty but by the burgeoning respect and connection he felt towards Adira. As dawn broke, the cityscape was a stark contrast of smoke and fire against the cool Andromedan morning. Robert, accompanied by a small contingent of royal guards and advisors, set out to implement their plan. Their journey through the capital was perilous, navigating through back alleys and deserted markets to avoid detection and rebel blockades. Meanwhile, Adira coordinated the Empire's defenses from the palace, her composure an anchor in the storm. She communicated with Robert through encrypted devices, guiding him through rebel hotspots and updating him on broader battle developments. Each successful maneuver tightened their strategy, but the rebel forces were relentless, adapting quickly to the shifting dynamics. The day's efforts culminated in a precarious victory as they managed to reclaim a critical supply depot, cutting off a major rebel artery. As Robert oversaw the fortification of the area, he felt a deep sense of achievement, not just in the tactical win, but in the trust he had built with Adira. Their partnership, forged under fire, had become the Empire's beacon of hope. Back at the palace, as Adira received reports of the day's successes, her face reflected both relief and the weight of ongoing responsibility. She knew this was just the beginning of a longer, grimmer struggle to save her empire. But with Robert by her side, the path, though fraught with danger, seemed just a little less daunting. As night fell once more over Andromeda, the echoes of rebellion continued to resound through the capital. But within the walls of the war room, there was a quiet determination, a shared resolve between a princess and a diplomat from distant worlds, united by a common goal. The battle for Andromeda had just begun, and both knew their journey ahead would be arduous. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, a bond had been formed, one that promised strength and perhaps, in time, salvation. The frigid winds of Andromeda's lesser-known moon, Draconis, swept over the rugged terrain as Robert Carter and Princess Adira prepared to disembark from their hidden shuttle. The stark landscape was intermittently lit by the natural luminescence of bioluminescent plants, a stark contrast to the tension that filled the air. Their mission was clandestine and fraught with danger, to gather critical intelligence on the rebel forces brewing beneath the seemingly serene surface of the Andromeda Empire. As they adjusted their disguise, Robert glanced at Adira, who was meticulously affixing the insignia of a low-ranking Imperial officer to her cloak. "Ready, Princess," he whispered, the title more of a jest in this setting than a formality. Adira nodded, her eyes hard with resolve. "Let's not call each other by titles." "Here, I'm just Ada," she murmured, slipping into the persona of a commoner, a role she seldom had the chance to play. The night was eerily silent as they made their way toward a local outpost, rumored to be a rebel sympathizer's haven. The moon's gravity was lighter than Earth's, but the weight of their task made each step feel like wading through molasses. The outpost, a ramshackle assembly of metal and rock, buzzed with the low hum of alien dialects and clinking glasses. Inside, the air was thick with the smoke of exorxian leaves, a local herb with a pungent aroma. Robert and Adira slipped into the crowded space, their eyes scanning for their contact. At the back of the room, tucked away in the shadows, a figure beckoned them with a subtle nod. The contact, a wiry Andromedan named Jorix, greeted them with a cautious look. "You're late," he grunted, his voice barely audible over the din of the outpost's rowdy patrons. "We had to avoid a patrol. The rebels are not the only ones watching their backs," Adira replied, her voice steady. Jorix's sharp gaze flicked between Robert and Adira, as if measuring their worth. "Follow me. We talk where ears are fewer." They followed Jorix through a maze of corridors into a dimly lit room filled with electronic equipment and maps strewn across every surface. Jorix wasted no time. The rebels planned to strike at the coronation ceremony next week, he divulged, pointing to a digital map projected on the wall. "They think it will symbolize the fall of the old empire and the rise of the new order." Adira's expression hardened at the mention of the coronation. Her brother was to be crowned, and his safety was paramount. Robert noticed the subtle clench of her fist, a tell that she was more than just a passive participant in this conversation. "We need to warn the Royal Guard without exposing our source. Can we make it look like the information came from another rebel faction?" Robert proposed, tapping into his diplomatic experience to weave deception into their strategy. Jorix nodded, impressed by Robert's quick thinking. "Possible. I can plant false communications. But it's risky. If they trace it back to me—" "We'll make sure they don't," Robert assured him, his confidence bolstering Adira's resolve. As they planned, the rapport between Robert and Adira grew. Each decision, each risk taken, solidified their trust in one another. They were no longer just diplomat and princess. They were comrades, bound by a shared mission that was bigger than either of them. After hours of strategizing, they emerged from the outpost, the first hues of dawn painting the horizon of Draconis. As they walked back to their shuttle, Adira spoke softly. "Thank you, Robert, for everything." Robert smiled, feeling the shift in their relationship. "We're in this together, Ada." The return journey was quiet, but the silence was a comfortable one, filled with mutual respect and a budding sense of camaraderie. As the shuttle ascended, leaving the troubled moon behind, both knew that the challenges ahead would test their newfound trust. But for now, they had each other's backs, and that was a solid start. The palace, a sprawling complex of silver spires and floating gardens, had always been a fortress of peace and diplomacy in the heart of the Andromeda Empire. But tonight, it was a battleground of shadows and suspicions. The rebellion, once a distant whisper, had infiltrated these hallowed halls, and with it came the cold grip of betrayal. Robert Carter, Earth's envoy, found himself caught in a web of espionage, not of his making. His background as a diplomat had not prepared him for the sharp sting of deceit that now surrounded him. As the evening began, Robert and Princess Adira had convened in the palace's clandestine library, a room filled with ancient texts and secrets. They discussed their strategies to quell the rebellion, their voices a soft murmur against the backdrop of thunderous uncertainty outside. It was here that their plan to intercept a major rebel communication was conceived, a move that could turn the tide of the war. But the night took a sinister turn. The palace alarms blared suddenly, slicing through the thick curtain of tension. The royal guards, clad in their gleaming armor, burst into the library. The lead guard, a towering figure with eyes as hard as the gemstones adorning his breastplate, pointed directly at Robert. "You are under arrest for espionage and conspiring with the rebels," he declared, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Adira's face, usually the epitome of composed royalty, fell into a mask of shock and confusion. "This must be some mistake," she protested, stepping towards Robert. Her hand reached out as if to bridge the physical space that the accusation had opened between them. Robert felt the cold metal of handcuffs click around his wrists, a stark contrast to the warmth of Adira's touch that he had come to cherish. As he was led out of the library, the eyes of the courtiers burned into him, their gazes a mixture of suspicion and fear. Confined to a small, dimly lit cell beneath the palace, Robert replayed the evening's events in his mind. The sting of betrayal was acute. Who could have planted evidence of his so-called treason? Was it a rebel infiltrator or someone from the royal court, perhaps threatened by his growing closeness to Adira and the power it represented? Outside his cell, the faint sound of footsteps approached. The door creaked open, and Adira stepped into the threshold, her figure haloed by the soft light of the corridor behind her. Her usual regal attire was replaced by a simple cloak, her face marked by resolve and a trace of sorrow. "Robert, I know you are innocent," she whispered, her voice firm despite the uncertainty that clouded her eyes. "I've managed to convince them to give us a chance to prove your innocence. We must act quickly." Together, they pieced together the events leading up to his arrest. They scrutinized everyone who had access to the library, tracking their movement and motives. It became clear that the betrayal was an inside job, meant to disrupt their plans and sow distrust between Earth and Andromeda. The breakthrough came when they reviewed the palace's security holovids, which revealed a trusted advisor, someone who had vehemently opposed their joint council, planting falsified evidence in Robert's quarters. Armed with this proof, Adira confronted the royal council. Freed from his chains, Robert joined Adira in the palace's grand hall, where the atmosphere was thick with the weight of recent revelations. The council, humbled and apologetic, reinstated Robert's position and praised his and Adira's resilience. As the first hints of dawn crept through the stained glass windows, Adira and Robert stood side by side, their ordeal drawing them closer than ever. They shared a moment of quiet solidarity, their hands linked, a silent vow to never let shadows divide them again. In the heart of betrayal, they had found trust. In the shadow of deceit, they had discovered truth. Now, united more firmly, they prepared to face the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that their bond was their greatest weapon against the turmoil outside the palace walls.